Hey friend, in this video, we are going to be painting a watercolor moon. Night sky backdrop with some pretty and beautiful, pretty, beautiful stars, starry night sky with a mountainscape in the foreground that's dark and moody. And we've got a big, beautiful moon, full moon in the background, going behind those mountains. Super fun. We're using salt, we're using white gouache, really fun tutorial, and anybody can paint this. It's really easy. So I'm gonna show you how to paint this watercolor moon, this night sky, and if you're ready, let's dive in. All right, so for this tutorial, we're gonna be doing a watercolor moon, but I'm not just gonna paint the moon, I'm gonna paint the sky behind it. We're gonna use salt on our moon, and I'm using this Himalayan salt, pink salt. So we can crack it and activate it in the water when we're on the moon. And then I'm gonna paint some like foreground mountain scenery that is just gonna be black. So I'm just gonna pencil that out real quick, really lightly, even though I will be going over this with black so it won't show. But this is gonna be my guide, and then my moon will kind of be, let's just say it's gonna be over here. Peeking out. I want more of the moon to show though, actually. Like so. Then erase. I want that moon outline to be really light so it doesn't show through my watercolor. This watercolor is transparent. Okay. So what I'm gonna start with is the background, I think. Yeah, we're gonna start with background first, and I'm gonna do an ombre kind of gradient from a really dark blue to a lighter blue. And I'm gonna mix up some Prussian blue with Mars black. And we are going to use water and that darker blue color to kind of just paint a dark streak at the top. I want it to be a little darker. And then we're just going to grab more water and pull that color down. As we go. So about every 2 streaks back and forth, I'm grabbing more water and rinsing off the pigment from my brush so that we're pulling the pigment and it's getting lighter. Making sure to avoid my moon area. By the way, if you want to watch this tutorial ad-free, I just started a Patreon channel where you could pay as little as $2 a month to watch our videos ad-free, and you also get early access to all of our videos. We have a few other tiers too, where we're throwing in a monthly Patreon-only video tutorial and a live art class with me each month. So check those out if you want some ad-free videos, or if you want to check out the Patreon tiers that we have and learn more from me. So I'm coming to the bottom of where this mountain is, not totally following my sketch because I'm going to overlap that with black so you won't see it. But I'm going to go back on top of this this top area and just darken it a little bit more. Make it feel more night sky. The moon is bright, so it doesn't need to be black, but this is a very bright full moon. Okay, and then once you get your sky gradient all done, we're just gonna wait for it to dry and move on to our moon. All right, so the area next to my moon is dry. That's what we wanna make sure of before we start painting the moon, because it'll just kind of blend together. I'm still wet up in here, so I'm not gonna touch that area yet. I'm gonna add stars later once everything is dry, but we're now ready to start painting our moon. So I'm gonna lay down just water on my brush. I wanna make sure that this water isn't slightly blue, so I'm going for my warm cup of water because it's clean. So I have clean water on my brush. Well, there is a little blue. Mostly clean water on my brush. And I'm gonna go through and add water to this whole moon, avoiding the mountain area and the sky area, because we're gonna add pigment to this. And it's just gonna have a mind of its own and go only where the water touches. So just adding water first, then I'm gonna do a really light value of Mars Black for my first kind of spots texture to the moon. So grabbing Mars Black, and then I'm just gonna release some of it in my water cup. I'm gonna start to poke in these craters and add texture to the moon. I'm gonna make the right side of the moon darker than the left. And I'm gonna continue getting darker with my pigment. So we're adding Mars Black to the brush. Because the base of our moon is still wet, these are kind of blending on their own. But the more you poke something, the more the pigment is going to spread out. And at this point, I'm also just going to grab water on my brush and dip water. That's going to create like little splotches. While this is still wet too, I want to add some salt. I'm just cracking right over, especially this darker area of the moon, because when the salt kind of dries in there, it's gonna create like a burst effect. So you just gotta be patient and let that dry. But as it's drying, the salt's gonna create a pretty cool effect. It's like soaking up some of the water and pigment into itself. And it'll create a really cool texture. And then when it's dry, you can brush it off. At this point, I'm gonna go in with my size 6 brush and just clean up the edge of the moon. Maybe drop in a little more water, little bursts here and there.
If you had the opportunity to go to the moon, would you want to?
Yeah, I think so.
Is that everyone's answer? Or would some people might be terrified of that, right?
I'm terrified of deep space. You know this about me.
I do know this about you.
I'm terrified of deep space. But I think, like...
But you would want to go to the moon?
I don't know, I guess. I mean, it's like such a unique opportunity.
That's yeah. Not many humans have done it.
Just waiting for this to dry. And then we are gonna paint in the mountains and the stars. So I'm gonna blow dry this. So now I have designer's white gouache from Winsor & Newton that I put in this old Dr. P.H. Martin's jar with water. And I'm going to add some little white bursts to our moon in the darker areas. So I'm just gonna do a little dot, and then I'm just gonna lightly just thin. And then we are going to paint in the mountain, which is just going to be Mars Black. A really thick amount of Mars Black on my brush. It's nighttime. These mountains are in our foreground, and the light source is behind them, so they're going to be very dark. The light source being the moon. So, especially with the way we're doing these mountains and the sky behind it, anyone can do this tutorial. It's really not that complex. We're just focusing on gradients for our sky. The moon is light to darker values and not getting too dark with it. And using wet and wet techniques for basically every section of this painting. So if you're not comfortable with wet and wet painting, I do have a video that addresses the 3 methods for wet and wet painting. So if you need a good tutorial on it, make sure you go check that video out. We'll link it in this video. These mountains should be really dark. And if you're wondering how my paper isn't buckling, it's because I'm painting on a block of paper. So I have the link to the paper I use in the description of this video, but blocks of paper are glued on all 4 sides. There's just a little section where it's not glued, where you can peel up the top sheet, but I think this comes with 20 sheets or 15 sheets stacked like a pad, but the edges are glued. So it lays flat, and then when it's dry, that's when I usually pull up the top sheet so it doesn't buckle. Because when you're painting, and if your paper is all buckly because you're using a lot of water or whatever the reason is, it can get really hard and tricky to have a consistent look to your washes, because they're going to buckle and create these warp areas that push all the pigment and water into the dips and valleys of the buckle, and it's just gonna create a weird effect. If you don't paint with a block of paper, then I recommend using 3M artist tape to paint or to tape down the edges so that it doesn't warp. And if you're having trouble removing the top sheet from your watercolor block, I just use my fingernail to slide gently through. But you can use a really soft edge ruler. You can use a canvas bone. You just want to make sure that you're going through it slowly and carefully so you don't tear your sheet when you're lifting it off. So there's our mountain, looking good. Now I'm just gonna go through with my size 2 brush and add in some stars. I'm gonna grab water and some of my designer gouache, white gouache from Winsor Newton in here. Just kind of plop. You can also flick, just make sure you don't get any on the mountain, or you can go back over it with black. This method is a bit quicker, but you'll need a little bit more water on your brush to make it move. We're getting on our mountain, but we're just gonna go back over it. Some flicks, some actual dots. Lots of stars. Then I'm gonna go back over our mountain with black. And it's still wet, so I don't have to do the whole thing. If you really want this moon to stand out, then do a really dark night sky and your stars will start to pop too a little more. Once your moon is completely dry, you can brush that salt off, adding texture with the white gouache, adding texture with the salt when it's still wet. And I just went through and dotted some of the stars and sprayed some of the stars to go a little faster. But the darker your sky is, the more this moon is gonna pop. We had a little bit of a light sky back there, so I'd want it to be darker, but it will pop a lot if you do a really dark blue behind it. There you have it, watercolor moons. If you haven't seen it yet, we launched our Patreon channel. I know I mentioned that in this video, but I'm really excited about that Patreon channel. We've got a really solid group in there, really excited group in there, and the Patreon monthly, only Patreon monthly tutorials are gonna be awesome. Really great tutorials in there and live monthly art classes. So make sure you check that out. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already and turn on those notifications so you don't miss any of those future tutorials that we've been working so very hard on. Every little bit of action that you take on this channel, if you comment, if you like, if you subscribe, all of that is super, super not only meaningful to us, it means the world to us, but it helps us beat the YouTube algorithm and gets this channel and these videos seen by more people. So do us a favor, and also the people out there that don't know about our channel yet, a favor by liking this video, commenting below with, and comment below, would you go to the moon if you were offered the opportunity? Would you go? I think I would, but now I'm unsure. Deep space is freaky deaky stuff. Let me know in the comments. We're very interested.
Sign it off.
Cool. See you in the next video.